The Assembly will hear an address by His Majesty Don Felipe VI, King of Spain. I request protocol to escort His Majesty and invite him to address the Assembly. Madam President, Mr. United Nations Secretary General, heads of state and government, ambassadors, authorities, ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning to you. I appear before you today as representatives of the member states of the United Nations in this year which marks the 80th anniversary of the organization's founding. This is a timely opportunity to reflect on the present, the past, and the future of this universal organization and on its contribution to peace, stability, and development in a time of extreme complexity. Ours is a world that is fast-paced and unrestrained, one that frequently brings us to the brink. One in which there are voices that continue to proclaim the end of multilateralism and the obsolescence and inefficacy of the United Nations. It is said that this is the result of replacing dialogue and cooperation with competition, rivalry, and extreme tension. This is not the world we're heading towards, we hear. Rather, it is the world in which we are already immersed. In response to this sense of disintegration, we must acknowledge that times have indeed changed and we need to adapt, even anticipate, without retreating into idealism, complacency, or short-sightedness. But it is precisely at this time of uncertainty that we must read the signs of our time clearly to avoid repeating the mistakes of the past and entering irreversible spirals. We are aided in this by memory, which is the most valuable tool that any generation possesses to confront its challenges. The memory of the 20th century calls to us each time that we gather in this General Assembly. It reminds us why this house of the international community was created, under which circumstances it was born, and which dark chapters of history it sought to close definitively. Let us hear in this hall once more the opening words of the preamble to the Charter of the United Nations. They begin, "We, the peoples of the United Nations, determined to save succeeding generations from the scourge of war." Which of the great ideals enshrined therein, peace, dignity, equality, justice, progress, has ceased to be relevant or to represent an ethical imperative? On which of these paths have we advanced sufficiently over these 8 decades to be able to declare that the journey of multilateralism and cooperation is complete? The silence in response to these questions is the clearest evidence that the United Nations is not only useful, it is indispensable and irreplaceable. Believing in the United Nations is believing firmly in the universality of the principles and values enshrined in its charter and in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. It is to resist the temptation of diluting them with specifics, relativisms, or exceptions. Because the dignity of the human being is non-negotiable. Believing in the United Nations is also believing in a rules-based world. Rules shape behaviors to which the vast majority of international actors adhere. Even when they are breached, they provide a basis for accountability and enforcement. Rules are the voice of reason used in international relations. They are the best defense against the law of the strongest. A world without rules is uncharted territory, a time without rules, is returning to the Middle Ages. The path proposed by the United Nations Charter is fraught with obstacles, and will never be fully completed. That is why the example of those who have been committed to its values is so precious. These are people working under extreme conditions, risking their freedom, their physical integrity, or even their lives, in a world plagued by conflict in all too many regions. We see this in Europe, in Ukraine, where war has been unleashed by Russia's unprovoked and unjustifiable aggression, violating the country's sovereignty and territorial integrity. Peace in Europe will not be possible without justice and accountability. Spain will continue to support all efforts aimed at achieving a just and lasting peace, grounded in the principles of international law, respect for human rights, and accountability. We also see this in its full severity in the Middle East, in Palestine, in the Gaza Strip. We cannot remain silent or look away from the devastation, the bombings, including of hospitals, schools, and places of refuge. In light of the countless civilian deaths, famine, starvation, the forced displacement of hundreds of thousands of people. To what end? These are abhorrent acts that stand in stark contrast to everything that this forum represents. They offend human conscience and shame the entire international community. Spain is a nation deeply proud of its Sephardic roots. When we speak to the people of Israel, we speak to a people of brothers and sisters, a people who, when they return to Spain, to Córdoba, Toledo, Seville, Barcelona, and so many other places, come home. This was the spirit behind the 2015 law, which was passed with broad consensus, granting Spanish nationality to descendants of Sephardic Jews originally from Spain. It is for this reason, and it is so difficult for us to understand, that we are so pained by the actions of the Israeli government in Gaza. We therefore cry out, we implore, we demand, stop this massacre now. No more deaths in the name of a people that is so wise and ancient, who have suffered so greatly throughout history. Let us be clear. We unequivocally condemn the heinous terrorism of Hamas, especially the brutal massacre of the 7th of October 2023 against the Israeli population, and we recognize Israel's right to self-defense. But with equal strength, we demand that the Israeli government fully uphold international humanitarian law throughout Gaza and the West Bank. We demand that humanitarian aid be delivered without delay, that a ceasefire be established with guarantees, and that all hostages still held by Hamas be released immediately. The international community must shoulder its responsibility to achieve as soon as possible a viable solution that would include the existence of two states, the recognition of the state of Palestine by an increasing number of member states of this organization, to which Spain added its voice this past May, must contribute to achieving a just and definitive regional peace based on the implementation of United Nations resolutions and on the universal recognition of the State of Israel. President, delegates, as we know, many conflicts are both caused by and result in resource scarcity, state fragility, and inequality. The gap between current realities and the fulfillment of the 2030 Agenda remains vast, and the current funding shortfall for sustainable development exceeds $4 trillion per year. The call for efficiency and resource optimization made at the 4th International Conference on Financing for Development that we held recently in Seville must be sustained. Accordingly, Spain, in line with the consensus-based commitment adopted there, has launched the Seville Plan for Support to Multilateralism. We have increased our contributions to international development funds, and we have reaffirmed our commitment to defending human rights, gender equality, and the environmental transition, which are central and distinctive elements of our foreign policy. Allow me to briefly address each of these three areas. First, human rights. Spain is, as of this year, a member of the Human Rights Council, enabling us to continue advancing causes such as the fight against racism, the abolition of the death penalty, and the promotion of economic, social, and cultural rights, while at the same time persisting in the struggle against all forms of discrimination. Because we support plural, open societies in which all citizens participate, and we are concerned by the erosion of democracies, the growing disaffection towards values that are essential to democratic coexistence. In these confusing times, which are testing our capacity for dialogue, we must remain steadfast in our commitment to these values. In harmony with these principles, we believe that immigration, when properly managed, is a vector of mutual development for countries of origin, transit, and host countries. We believe that the human rights of migrants must, therefore, be the principal reference for our actions. Therefore, we fully support the implementation of the Global Compact on Migration and the Global Compact on Refugees. Secondly, I wish to refer to gender equality. This year marks the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. It is therefore a fresh opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to real and effective equality. This is not merely a step forward in human rights, but above all, a matter of justice. Spain aspires to remain a global beacon in areas such as sexual and reproductive rights, the fight against sexual and gender-based violence, and the increased participation of women in leadership roles and in decision-making processes. Third, the environment. The triple planetary crisis that we are facing, climate change, pollution, and biodiversity loss, demands strengthened governance and sufficient resources to accelerate a just energy transition. This must enable us to triple renewable energy capacity, double energy efficiency, and to continue decarbonizing our economies. These are goals that are as ambitious as they are essential, and doubt must be completely excluded from the equation here. Spain calls for consensus and ambition ahead of COP30, which will be held in Brazil this November. There are other just as important challenges, including managing the impact of the transformative revolution known as artificial intelligence, which can accelerate progress on the 2030 agenda if we know how to direct it towards a fair and equitable digital transformation. And in health, the global dimensions of which were tragically evident during the recent COVID pandemic, we welcome here the consensus reached on the pandemic agreement. This strengthens the central role of the World Health Organization within the global health architecture. Madam President, Spain's foreign policy is built around three fundamental axes based on geography, history, and conviction. These are towards Africa and the Mediterranean, towards the Americas and the Atlantic, and towards Europe. I would like to share some thoughts on these three areas. Spain is well aware that Africa represents a strategic global interest of the highest order. The present is marked in certain countries by structural deficiencies and some brutal conflicts and wars that receive insufficient attention when compared with others that I've already referred to. Here I'm referring to numerous peacekeeping operations in the region to which Spain contributes decisively. This is the case in Western Sahara, where Spain will continue to support the Secretary-General's personal envoy in seeking a solution that is acceptable and consistent with UN norms and frameworks. Africa's future will be shaped by a young, dynamic, and proactive population that is increasingly engaged in global affairs. That's the future that we must support. Spain has therefore adopted the Spain-Africa Strategy 2025 to 2028. We want to develop a partnership based on concrete action and shared interests, and to promote vibrant African multilateralism embodied by the African Union and other sub-regional organizations. Strictly bilaterally speaking, I must mention the special relationship of neighborliness and cooperation that binds us to the Kingdom of Morocco, which in recent years has been revitalized to the benefit of our peoples. Latin America and the Caribbean represent for Spain a community of kindred nations, an irreplaceable part of our identity strengthened by shared heritage, that is, the Spanish language, spoken by 600 million people around the world. Spain holds the pro tempore secretariat of the Ibero-American Community of Nations until the end of 2026, and Madrid will hold the next Ibero-American Summit. We will continue to support the EU's engagement in the region, which will culminate this year in the EU CELAC Summit that will be held in Colombia next month, November. The European Union is one of the greatest achievements of concord and a model for multilateralism. Its voice is more necessary than ever in these times. We therefore advocate for a union that is increasingly effective, cohesive, secure, and competitive on the global economy. I think it's important to recall that on the 11th of June this year, we launched a definitive political agreement regarding the key aspects of the future accord between the European Union and the United Kingdom. This was a historic agreement that respects Spain's position on sovereignty and jurisdiction over Gibraltar, which will bring confidence, legal certainty, and stability to the lives of the populations of the Campo de Gibraltar and Gibraltar itself. Madam President, I began speaking about the past and present of the United Nations, and I shall dedicate my last few words to its future. In these times of severe budgetary constraints, I call on all member states to reaffirm their commitment to this organization. I encourage all of its personnel, led by the Secretary-General, to persist in their enormous efforts towards efficiency and effectiveness, prioritizing those areas whose neglect would represent an unacceptable breach of the ethical standards that must always guide their work. We continue to believe in the need to advance reform initiatives, and we offer our capacity for dialogue and consensus building, as well as our firm multilateral conviction in this endeavour. On this 80th anniversary, which coincides with the 70th anniversary of Spain's accession to the organisation, I wish, Madam President, to renew my country's recognition of all of the men and women working within the United Nations. You are the custodians of the memory of the 20th century and the guardians of the hopes invested in the 21st. And it is now, when so many questions are surrounding multilateralism and cooperation, that we need you most. Thank you very much.
Au nom de l'Assemblée générale,
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the King of Spain. The Assembly